brothers and sisters, friends, enemies, and comrades. I hope you're doing well wherever you are. This is Kenyan Revolutionary for another live session. So, karibuni sana, karibuni sana, karibuni sana. I hope you guys are doing well wherever you are. Let me put my thing up because my hair looks crazy. But anyway, so I can look like a real. But anyway, guys, karibuni, 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 karibuni. I hope you guys are doing well wherever you are. Let's discuss something that we need to discuss today. Oh, excuse me. Let's have a discussion real quick. If you're going to join me, first of all, before I even get started, ladies and gentlemen, if you're joining me for the first time and you're wondering what this channel is about, this channel is about Kenyan politics, or should I say Kenyan politics, and world politics as it relates to Kenya, okay? So karibuni sana, karibuni sana. And if you have already been here and you've subscribed to the channel, please, you know the first order of business is to do what? The first order of business is to like the video. So go ahead and do that real quick before we get started. Vuta Kiti, we need to talk, all right? We need to talk. So the long-awaited BBC documentary came out sometime between last night, this morning, whatever, depending on where you are. It was posted. It's on YouTube. It's called Blood Parliament. For those of you who live under a rock, maybe you might be looking at me and wondering, what in the world are you talking about? This Blood Parliament documentary basically examines what took place last June or July 25th, June 25th, when the Gen Zs, the youth who are dubbed as Gen Zs, when they went to protest. There was a massive protest in Kenya, and they were protesting against the finance bill at the time, which passed through. But anyway, what this documentary basically, it's a 37 minutes documentary. It's on YouTube. You can just type in on YouTube and watch it. What it really zeroes in is on the atrocities that happen. You know, the whole, the shootings, the killings, the brutalization of these young men and women who made it to the parliament. And it highlights the deaths of 3 youth in particular, David, and 2 more I forgot. I'm sorry, I'm terrible with names. But anyway, there were 3 of them that, died that day. Of course, there were some people who got injured, some people were abducted, but it just zeroes in on the death of 3 people. Now, there was skeptics. There are skeptics about people who are skeptical about this documentary when it came out, and they were questioning what really this documentary zeroes on. What's the aim of this documentary? Why BBC all of a sudden is having this documentary? I will come to that because I also have my reservations about the whole, or my suspicion regarding this documentary. What it is aimed at achieving. What were they trying to achieve with this documentary? Coming out with it at this timing, okay? At this time of the year or whatever the case is, okay? So, the main people, okay, there's the person who's narrating the video, and also the people who are featured there, which was very disappointing, was Hanefa, Mwangi, what's his name? Something Mwangi. What's his name? This commercial activist. Mwangi, whatever his name, Mwangi, I forgot. Boniface Mwangi, yes. Babu Owino also speaks on that documentary. And Faith Obiambo, who is the president of the law whatever case. I don't know, whatever. You know who I'm talking about, right? All right. So basically, just if you haven't watched it, I'll spoiler alert. Just so you know, I'm going to spoil it for you if you haven't watched it. So basically, they show how these 3 young men were shot, and they zero in on the officials who, took the shots. Who shot them basically. They try to zero in on them. The patches that they had on their shirts, the gear, the military gear or security gear that they had on, just in an attempt to identify who these people are. One of them was not the actual shooter, but the person who was ordering the shooting was called John Kiboi or Kaboi or something like that, okay? Go watch the Nino. Now, I'm not going to dwell on what the documentary basically, minute by minute narration of what the documentary is all about, because you can just go look at it and see what it's all about, okay? But I want to jump on something that's maybe is more, like I said, in this channel, Kenyan Revolutionary Channel, I try to ask questions. I said question everything and question everyone, including me, okay? So let's ask ourselves, what was this documentary made to achieve? What was it meant to achieve? Now, I had to divorce myself from any kind of emotion, okay? As far as, let me not say emotion, but bias, any bias. I was watching this, try to have not, have any bias when I was kind of judging the possible goal that these producers or people who brought this thing together, what were they aiming for? What is the, because if you're making a documentary, there's a message, there's a certain message you try to pass, okay? It might not be an overt message, but it might be settling on your conscience, okay? It might be propagating something, okay? What was it? That's the question, okay? Because the whole documentary, if you look at it, it's a very emotional, piece, okay? Thank you so much, Mugende Katende. Nice seeing you, the first order of business. You know what it is, right? Karibu sana. Thank you so much. I'm glad to see you, okay? Now, like I said, yes, like and share, please. Absolutely. Thank you, Mugende. Nice seeing you. So, like I said, the documentary itself, it's a very emotional piece, because it takes you through, it gives you a little bit of background of the three young men that they concentrated on. David and the two other ones, I forgot their names. I'm sorry. I'm terrible with names, but it gives them, I think one of them was a butcher, the other was a university student who was studying business, I think, and there was the other one who was the first one, I forgot his name, who was also there, who got killed, okay? And they, even show the last minute before they got shot and killed, okay? So for somebody who's watching this for the first time, who's coming at it, who's watching this, approaching, trying to just viewing this documentary, you'll get emotional, mixed emotions, okay? Of course, it's a very moving piece when you see these young men being gunned down. They have their lives ahead of them, probably, looking towards the future, trying to change the future by agitating for change, protesting against this, draconian tax measures, okay? So these were young people who were looking forward for a better future. They were normal people like you and me who were out there on the streets peacefully protesting against the government of the day, okay, or the proposed, finance bill, okay? And then it shows how their last moments when they were gunned down, their bodies, and then one of them, they actually showed their mom. Boniface Mwangi went to one of their funerals and interviewed the mom, and the mom was very heartbroken to a point where she literally had nothing to say. It was Boniface Mwangi asked, which I thought it was too much. I think Boniface Mwangi, I know you're trying to make a whatever, whether he was working on this documentary or just having his own personal, video footage of the mom. I think that was not the very best idea. I mean, a mourning mother is not, when she's in a funeral and just buried her son, that is not the ideal time to actually ask the mother, what do you think of the government, or what do you think about, the death of your son meant, the mother. I didn't like that part, okay? That's like taking advantage of someone who's mourning his or her son, and you're asking him about political view or something like that. I felt that was like, I didn't like that moment. But either way, guys, make sure you like the video. But either way, it takes you through, it gives you that background of these young men, and you can't help but get emotional because these are people who are relatable. They're like me and you, for some of us, our younger years, but we are on the same kind of, we are going through the same thing. So if you see a young man, being battered, somebody who's really was looking forward for a better future, who was politically active, who felt like he needed to be out there and speak out against this finance bill, and all of a sudden he's gone down and is dead, it's a touching moment, okay? Then, not only are you moved by this, you'll be also driven by anger. You'll be angered by this because you see how brutal these security forces, whether it's the police or the so-called the now that the army or whatever, not the army, but let me say KDF, Kenya Defense Forces, okay, who just gunned down these young men like they were nothing, like they just mowed them down with these semi-automatic weapons, just not even caring about their lives, okay? They don't value life. So that kind of moves you or drives you, it angers you. Inakukasirisha ukiona mtu ana, just shooting, recklessly into a crowd of people who are not even armed and not even attacking anyone. Okay, granted, they went to the parliament, but they were even, I mean, it was property damage. I mean, if you see somebody breaking over or just breaking things in the parliament, does that warrant the security forces to, shoot them down because of that? No. I would argue no. They were not a threat. They were not an immediate threat to anybody, okay? These guys were just there, and they were there for like 5 minutes or whatever the case is, according to the documentary, okay? So like I said, it's a very emotive piece. It takes you, it's a roller coaster of emotions. On one hand, you feel you're moved by the story behind the deceased, and on the other hand, you are angered by the level of recklessness, okay? The capricious way of this, the caprice, the way of how the government handles this issue. I mean, Ruto was sitting there denying everything, and these parliamentarians didn't even care about these protesters, and they kept on, you see what I'm saying? It's making us relive those moments that, sometimes we might not be so proud of. So it takes you through a 37 minutes of, like I said, a roller coaster of emotions, anger, and also, moved by people who are relatable to us, everyday people, people who look like us, people who went through struggles like us, people who are, young men who are looking for a better way in their own country, okay? So that is what I'm talking about. Now, what I find suspicious, if you're looking at it now, let's get out of the emotional part of it. Now, what I find suspicious, let's take out the emotions, let's take out everything, let's get to the actual content. What was the message, the overall message of this Blood Parliament documentary by the BBC? What was the overall message? That's what now I want to address. Okay, we've addressed the emotional part, the roller coaster part of it, how it drives you crazy in anger, and also how it moves you to tears. Now let's divorce from the emotions and address what this documentary actually is trying to portray. The big takeaways from this documentary is, number one, now this is my opinion, you go watch it and you make up your opinion, you can type on the chat. I want to hear what you have to say about this. And for those of you who are going to watch it this on repeat, I want to make this live lengthy. Watch this and go put it on your chat, put in the comment section, because I want to read your comments and I want to see how you feel about this documentary. What did you make it feel? How did it make you feel? And what was your takeaway from this, okay? Give me your views. Now, the overall takeaway was this, okay? Number one, at the end of the documentary, it explicitly says or shows or conveys that the Kenyan police and the KDF were involved in shooting these young folks that lost their lives. Okay? At first I was like, okay, it might be the police, but the KDF are not involved in this. But apparently, in the documentary, they asked the KDF, and the KDF actually responded and never denied any involvement. In fact, they issued a statement, according to the documentary. At the end of it, it says that the KDF say that in the event that, there were, when the parliament was under attack or whatever the case is, the KDF was involved to offer support to the national police in those events. Okay? Karibu sana Shimarion na kuona. Hatujambo. Karibu sana. Usininyime like. Go ahead and like. I also see you. Please, the first order of business, jamani, msikose. So what I'm saying is this. So the KDF never, they never denied involvement in the whole process. In fact, towards the end, they identified the shooter of one of the university students. I forgot his name. I'm sorry, guys. Go watch it. You remember the name. It was somebody, they zeroed in on him using the metadata, whatever the case is, and camera, and whatever, blah, 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 blah. They reviewed all these footages that they got from all of our Citizen TV and all that stuff. And they zeroed in and they saw a patch on one of the guy's shoulder patch, okay, on his shirt. And that's how they knew that KDF was also involved in this operation. And it was the KDF guy who actually made the shot one of the guys. Now, for me, when I heard that, I was like, okay, so KDF were involved in the shooting of these young folks. But here's a larger question that I also ask myself, because I'm not just somebody who's going to, like I said, I'm suspicious of everything and everyone and everything, okay? So, I question myself. I ask myself this question. This is an interesting time to release this kind of documentary. Because remember, not so far back, just a few weeks ago, a week ago or 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, what was the discussion? Are you following me? Please follow me very carefully. Connect the dots, like I usually say. I'm your political dietitian. I want to give you the nutrients, and I'll connect the dots for you, okay? So here it is. A few weeks ago, remember when I was talking to you guys and I was telling you how we were, no, I was not telling you, but we were discussing in general how, the military could have taken, KDF are issued assault rifle, not police. Okay, nice, Bombay. Bombay, please like the video. Nice seeing you. But listen to me. Remember when this talk of military became a huge topic in Kenya after Raila Odinga came in and made those pronouncements by saying that if it wasn't for me stepping in, the military could have taken over from Ruto. Remember those statements? Then there was a whole huge discussion about the army, their role, and how they could have taken over from Ruto. Remember that? Okay? Remember that? And there were some people in some quarters who felt like it's not such a bad thing if the army was to take over from Ruto. Of course, we can have debates over that, whether the pros and cons, because like I said, I usually argue that if you let the army take over from Ruto, you can either have a Museveni or you can have a Ibrahim Traore, okay? So it's still a gamble. But, hear me out. The Kenyan military, KDF, okay? The Kenyan military are, by and large, are viewed as a neutral, are neutral in this political issue. They're always not taken aside, which is not entirely true, because we know of military personnel getting involved. Nice seeing you, Green. We know of military personnel getting involved in political processes before. There are past elections where there's some generals who are involved, and I'm not talking about Ogola, I'm talking about way before Ogola. Okay? So, but listen to me very carefully. Listen to me very carefully. Once Raila opened the can of worms by mentioning that if it wasn't for him stepping in and saving Ruto from a military coup d'etat, okay, or a military takeover, the discussion was, should the military take over? In fact, there were some people, there's a lot of people in some quarters who are saying it would be better if the military took over. They are much better than Ruto. That's what some people were arguing. And remember, we were reminded, listen to me, we were reminded of how the people were glad to see the military. Remember when the Mandamano was happening, especially when that day when it was about Occupy the JKIA, and when the police were brutalizing people at Nenio, at the pipeline estate, whatever the case is, and the military were called, and the people were shouting, and they were not shouting, but they walianza shangilia the military, greeting the military. Wakasema tunataka majeshi wako na sisi, they are with us. In fact, the army people, the army actually ilifanya nini? Ilisindikiza, sindikiza the wananchi to their neighborhood when they were leaving CBD. Remember that? Do you remember that? So the Gen Zs, not all, but a good number of them, always felt like the army are on their side. Not only Gen Zs, but Kenyans in general always felt that in the event Ruto was to go rogue or start mowing down people using this police force, because at some point he will be overwhelmed by the population. If there was a popular revolution, he will be forced to bring in the army to come intervene. In fact, there's a law that was passed on June 25th, or the day before or after, whatever the case is, that was passed to give the KDF permission to intervene in case there is anarchy, or there's, if the police are overwhelmed. Because remember, the army are supposed to stay in the barracks. They're not supposed to leave the barracks for any kind of reason. The army is supposed to fight against, enemies abroad and, maybe within, but they have to, for them to operate in civilian affairs or in stabilizing the country, they have to get the permission from the legislative body. And remember that legislation, that motion was passed in the parliament usiku wa manane, okay, after June 25th, to give the military renewal. But anyway, let me go back to what I'm trying to say. The general ethos, the general support, the general feeling by Kenyan people, they always felt like the military is on their side and not the side of Ruto. They felt like Ruto and the police force are one, and that the military are on their side. Nanisikia, we can like up, and I can see people are getting in. We can like up, please don't hesitate. The people, generally people feel like if the police, Ruto uses the police to brutalize the wananchi, as we have seen in the historically, we know that, okay? And majority of the people after that JKIA incident, most people feel like the military will side with them if things go left. Okay, that's how people feel. Okay, and even when Raila opened this can of worms by talking about the military taking over, military was about to take over if it wasn't for him to intervening, some people started saying they don't mind the military getting in and taking over from Ruto. After all, they think the military is always on the people's side. And they highlight those events that I just mentioned, when the JKIA, occupied JKIA, when the police started brutalizing people, the military were called, but the military did not take action against any wananchi. In fact, it is said that the military were telling police to stop. And they even told the police to stop attacking the wananchi, okay? In some places in Nairobi, okay? So that was the case. So people always felt like the military are on their side. Now, you might ask the same, you might ask yourself this question. If the BBC has released this Blood Parliament documentary, and they're casting the KDF, the police are the bad guys. We already know that. We are not going to touch on the police. Police are always on Ruto's side. They're known for their brutality. But we are going to talk about the military now. The military, who are viewed as an neutral in this conflict between the people versus the state. At least the state being run by Ruto and his rogue regime. Okay, we can you like up? We can you like? Please, guys, don't hesitate to like. Now that a majority of people felt like, the military is on their side, BBC comes with this documentary which sheds light into the involvement of the military personnel shooting these very Gen Zs. Is it not a coincidence? Okay? Weeks before, we were talking about how military are great and they're part of the Gen Z. They are going to support the Gen Zs in case Ruto goes rogue. But BBC comes out with this documentary, and it shows us that there are some members of the military. Karibu sana Laban Misiani, please, and weka like hapo kwa ninyo, weka like hapo, and others who are watching. BBC comes in and basically shuts down this whole idea that military is on your side. You as the Gen Z, you as the Kenyan, you as the people of Kenya, sovereign people of Kenya. Basically, that's what this documentary does. If you take out the fluff about the emotions and what happened and all that stuff, which is fine, but I'm just saying. Because if you even go to the X, a lot of people are very disappointed. They're like, Kumbe KDF, they've already bought that. They're really upset that by the fact that the KDF were involved in shooting down one of the young folks. Or even generally, they're saying the KDF were brought in to shoot down the Gen Zs. So basically, what this documentary does is it shuts down the idea that the military is with the people, or is on the people's side. Unaelewa? Misiani hebu weka like hapo. Laban. Okay? You understand what I'm saying? You see what I'm saying? The general Nenio, Gen Z was a coup d'etat. Aya, weka like Laban. So mnasikia? The general feeling was that the military is on the people, Gen Z's side, with the people, with the popular people, the sovereign people of Kenya. But now the BBC comes up and shows us that members of the military were employed or deployed in the streets, in this struggle, in this commotion, not even struggle, it was a peaceful protestation, to gun down the very people that the Gen Z thought were supporting them. Mnaelewa? You see what I'm saying? Now, that's number one thing that I say, connect the dots. Do you see my point? I'm saying this. The discussion about the military takeover or the military removing Ruto was a few weeks ago. Okay, and people were saying the military are always with us. They were with Gen Zs. We saw them escorting the wananchi, and people were cheering, greeting the military when the military were deployed. Remember when people were trying to go to State House? Vile military leto watu wakaanza kusalimia military and people were friendly to the military and they were exchanging pleasantries. But now BBC comes out with a documentary and shuts down that idea by exposing the fact that the members of this military were shooting the Gen Zs and actually shot one of their own, the Gen Zs. So it changes how the Gen Z what? It is an attempt to change how Gen Zs view the military, because now they will be thinking, kumbe hawa military walikuwa wanatuua sisi. Sisi tulikuwa nafikiri ni mapolisi peke yake. Because remember tulikuwa tunawasalimia tukiwashangilia tukisema jeshi iko na sisi, jeshi iko na sisi. Kumbe now these guys were coming in and were shooting us. And this comes again for the umpteenth time. And this comes after there was talks of a possible military coup d'etat that was about to happen on June 25th last year, after Raila Odinga said what he said, and the debate thereafter, national debate that most people are discussing on X and other platforms, some supporting the idea that the Kenyan military supports the people, are with the people. So taking Ruto out and replacing it with the Kenyan military is not such a bad idea. But that BBC documentary has poured water on that kind of thinking. Because now we see there's the last person who was killed in that documentary was shot by a military personnel. And they highlighted that by showing the patch that was on his left Nino sleeve. Okay? You can go see that Nino. You see what I'm saying? But anyway, that was my first take. That was my first questioning of things. Okay? I didn't like the fact that Boniface Mwangi and Hanefa were in it, were the main so-called activists. Okay? Because these guys, we know they are compromised. Okay? They are compromised. So that's my first takeaway from this. Okay? Number two. So my first takeaway is this. This BBC documentary destroys the idea or dissuades any Gen Z from thinking that the military is on their side. Number two, my second takeaway from this is this. This documentary, it's a fear-mongering piece. You might watch it, you might look at it and say, no, there's nothing, whatever. If I'm a Gen Z and I'm watching what really transpired, it's kind of, if you're not strong, if you can see through the Ninio, through the fluff, you can be like, oh my goodness. Going for a protest is like, ni kama unaenda kudedi. That's suicide. Why should I go out there? If members of the KDF and Kenyan police, this state machinery, majeshi wako kwa streets, na polisi wako kwa streets, na unachapa watu bunduki hivi, with no regard for human life, why would I go out there? That is the impression I get. Because if you listen to Hanifa, Boniface Mwangi, Babu Owino, and anybody that was on that documentary, please guys, like the video. Okay? Rumors has it that military was split during the June 25th. Some wanted Kasongo to go like Jen Ogola. June 25th, 24 was a personal suicide. I will get to that. Bombi, very, very good point, Bombi. Is it Bombi? I don't know. Like the video, guys. Make sure you like the video. So, again, my second takeaway is this. It's a scare-mongering tactic It is not done overtly. They're not going there and say, oh, Gen Z were killed. It was, of course, they say it was bloody, it was messy and all that. But without explicitly telling you that protesting in Kenya will lead to you dying, they spend a lot of time, okay, a lot of time concentrating on how sad, how dangerous, how brutal this exercise of going to public and protesting against this Ruto regime. You get what I'm saying? It basically takes a lot of time. 80% of the documentary, it's about how sad, how dangerous, how brutal these police forces were, along with the KDF. And the images also that they play concentrates on the atrocities. So by portraying that and spending a lot of time talking about how unfortunate, how sad, how brutal this exercise of protesting against this Ruto government, what it does, it builds fear. It instills fear into anybody, any Gen Z, any Kenyan, any protester who might be thinking about having another maandamano. So my second takeaway is that this documentary propagates fear among the Gen Zs, because at no point in the documentary did anyone, Babu Owino, who was part of it, Boniface Mwangi, Hanefa, Ruth Odhiambo, at no point any of them spoke boldly looking at the camera saying, justice must be achieved. We should continue to fight for justice for the young men, whether it was David or the other two gentlemen who were gunned down. None of them in that documentary, that 7-minute documentary, none of them spoke boldly saying that we shall not stop until we find justice for these young folks that were gunned down. The only thing they did at the end was show us the statements by IPOA, Kenya Police Force, and Kenya Defense Force. Basically, to demoralize you, to show you, remind you of something that we already know, that the independent bodies in Kenya do not work, are compromised, and are in full control by William Ruto. So basically, it is a demoralizing documentary. If you take away the emotions and look at it divorced from emotions, this documentary does not cheer you up, does not encourage you. It zeroes in on something that you already know. Who didn't know that the police force were part of this killings. The police. Wangapi wa hawakujua? Hebu nione kwa mkono. Sisi sote tulikuwa tumejua. Did we know that the army were involved? Some of us possibly knew. To Bonby's point, where Bonby tells us that the military was split. That's a good point. Possibly. Personally, I don't know. But what I can tell you is this. Ruto might have not tapped in with the whole military. Let me explain this in another way. Ruto can have a special force, handpicked, elite members of the military, okay, to come assist his murderous police force, rogue police force, to instill fear by killing these Gen Zs. Because if you look at the documentary, the last murder, the last killing, the shooting that you see, the one that they shot that young man who was a student, an economic student from Nairobi University, I believe. I mean, the guy just knelt down and pointed the rifle or whatever the case is, and akamchapa. And he was the guy who had a patch, which indicated that he was from the army, KDF. But my point I'm saying is this, to Bonby's point, which is a very good one. He says the military was split. And I say this, I don't think, it is not like Ruto called on the whole military to go to the streets on that occasion. I think Ruto handpicked specific members of the military, okay, to go out there to do that very action that you saw on that video, which is shooting down protesters for the sole reason of instilling fear on the Gen Zs. You understand? So, to Bonby's point again, the whole military might not have been aware that they had an okay to intervene in that parliament. Okay? Unaelewa? The whole military might not be aware. They were not called upon. Si wote waliambiwa ati endeni mkasimamishe mambo huko kwa parliament. It is a few who are handpicked to do the dirty job. That's why I kind of agree with Bonby when he said the military was split. Because like he said, it doesn't make sense. Remember that clip when the military waliingia vile waliitwa kwa wingi. That day when people were going to JKIA. Vile waliitwa kwa wingi. When they got there, they started greeting. Wakaanza kuchapa story na majenzi. Because these members of the military, the majority of them, walikuwa nasalimiana, they are just young. Unajiona wewe mwenyewe, huyo ni ndugu yako. Unaenda kumchapa bunduki ya nini? But the one that shot somebody at that parliament building in June 25th, they probably got a personal call from Ruto. Ruto hakuita army yote, hakuleta KDF yote iende. I won't be even surprised if Kariri didn't know about it. Ruto alichagua, because remember, and next time if I have my laptop, I will play the Ninio. Again, I usually give you this guy, you have to go watch him. This guy called Martin Gatia. He passed away a few years ago. He used to say this, but back then during Kibaki's regime and Uhuru's regime, he mentioned that the top generals at that time were members of the Kikuyu elites at that time. Okay? I'm not trying to get tribal here. I'm making a point. Just listen to me very carefully. He called them they were part of the Mount Kenya Mafia back then when Kibaki was president and Nani and Uhuru Kenyatta. every president that comes in always makes sure that their people, the head people in the military, are people from their own community. Because, of course, they don't trust other community, especially after what happened in 1982, the military coup d'etat. So Ruto, when he came to power, Ruto did the same thing. Reshuffle akaeka his own elite force. Watu wakalenjin huko juu. Okay? That way, if the military wakianza ku act funny, you know, they can always, he can always stay safe. Okay? That is something that is always has been happening. Like I said, this started after Moi, the when it was viewed, okay, because 1982, the military coup d'etat, failed one. It was seen as Luo's military, members of the Luo community who are in the military were trying to overthrow a Kalenjin president. Understand? Unfortunately, we have to just say it the way it is, because Kenyan politics, it goes down to tribes. I mean, that's how we've been always, see things, okay? So like I said, the takeaway in this is, from this BBC thing, number one, was to dissuade you, demoralize you from thinking that the military is with you. Ndio wache kufikiria ati the military are with the people. By showing you, or exposing the fact that possibly a member of the military is the one who shot the guy who died on that last clip in that documentary. Okay? You're number one. Number two, it is made, the takeaway is this, it was to instill fear to the Gen Zs. And like I said, the whole documentary is about the atrocities. Hakuna mtu alikuwa anasema ati we should really continue fighting for the justice of those young people who died. It was all about, I'm so sad he died. They were not a threat. They didn't deserve to die like that. Which is fine. I understand the point. I get the point. But they should balance it with what? Where are those that still have fire and saying there should be justice for those who were gunned down? And that law has to be pursued. We should pursue justice, even if IPOA does not want to investigate the misconduct by the police. Even if there's no tribunal, independent tribunal, that can look into these members of military who shot down that guy at the parliamentary building. Wazi. The guy was running away, had his back against him, and was fleeing. He was not carrying any weapon. He was not carrying anything. Lakini wakamchapa bunduki. Where is this? This is what I wanted to hear. Because if you have a documentary, you also have a moral responsibility. Okay, it's nice and sweet telling us the sad stories about these guys, the people who are departed. Okay, Hanifa, Nani, whatever, are speaking there about, the deceased and what transpired that day. And Babu Owino is saying how Aliruka fence could check on the Denio. That's all well and good. I'm not against it, but I'm saying this. You've given us two sides. What about the side that says, let's pursue justice for these guys? Don't just show us a quote by the police, Kenyan police in Asemati, or IPOA, the constitutional body that's independent, that's supposed to look into this matter. Or the KDF, they're just, you see what I'm saying? If Hanifa and Nani and Nakaapo, I would like to hear them say, we are going to pursue the justice for these guys. And if it means going back to the streets, we are going to do so, because these guys were unjustifiably killed. But no, it doesn't say that. So BBC has its own agenda, in my opinion. It almost makes it, if you think about it, if you look at the whole thing, it almost makes you, it's a way of showing you, let me just say this. If you look at the whole documentary, it's only 37 minutes. But if you look at it in its totality and finish looking at it, it almost makes you feel like this is a helpless situation. Ruto is firmly in control of Kenya by using the military, the police, and everything else in his disposal. And Kenyans are helpless. And he's continuing to brutalize Kenyans. Ebu ongezeni like tatu hapo. That is basically what this BBC is about. This BBC documentary is. I'm talking about my takeaway from watching this BBC stuff. What I came out with, what I got from it. It took too much time reminding us of what already we know. If anything, ilikuwa inaingiza tu ile emotions ambayo inataka just amplify the emotion. Yeah, sadness and frustration and anger. Then it finishes with what? By the way, you are helpless. This is what IPOA is supposed to do. This is what the police cannot investigate themselves. And then, so inasema ati, even after all these bad things happening to you, nyinyi wa Kenya, there's nothing you can do because Ruto is brutal and is in control. Na hakuna kitu mtafanya. That is basically what this BBC thing is going. Is it? Without saying so. So if I was to rate it on a scale of 1 to 10, I would give it a 4. Thumbs down. Thumbs down. Thumbs down. Because it should have been balanced. If you're going to show us all these things that has happened, and you have so-called activists who are part of this documentary giving their commentary, I would have loved to hear a rallying cry for justice, for whatever has happened, regardless of what IPOA has done, regardless of what IPOA has statement has renew, regardless of what the government has refused to renew on the statement, regardless of what the military or KDF has refused to, what has they've said in the, I would have loved those activists sitting on that chair with the low faith of the humble, saying that justice, we shall continue pursuing justice, regardless of what these atrocities that has been committed against these innocent young Gen Zs, young men and women. We shall continue. But that was not involved in this documentary, which makes it a piece a documentary designed to demoralize you from fighting for justice. That is my take from this BBC 37-minute documentary. Go watch it, come back, and comment on this comment section. And I will share all your comments next time I go live, which might be later on today or tomorrow. Do so. If you're going to watch this on repeat, please do not hesitate. The first order of business is to like, share, comment. Sorry. The first order of business is to like the video. If this is your first time, go ahead and subscribe. And if you have done that, if you have subscribed already, like, share, comment, and put the notification on so next time I come in, you'll find me where? Right here. Peace and blessings, folks. I have to go. So I'll talk to you guys later. Peace and blessings.